Hi, let's take a few minutes to talk about the BlazeMeter solution architecture. Now we've already seen the web portal that is the core of BlazeMeter. BlazeMeter is a SaaS solution that lives in the cloud and provides an easy to use web portal for setting up and monitoring tests. But there's much more to it behind the scenes than that. First of all, anything you can do on the web portal you can do through the REST API. We literally build the API first and build the portal around it. So anything you can do with BlazeMeter you can do through integration. There's also a command line interface and a related domain-specific language, or DSL, that we'll talk about in a minute, that provides interface to using all the same solutions as well. So the typical scenario would be what you see in this diagram, which is that you've got the BlazeMeter at the center and you're running a test, and you see an arrow pointing downward here. Test orchestration is going to the public clouds and launching instances of BlazeMeter in the public clouds, which are driving traffic against a website or a mobile app or an API, right? And this is probably a production scenario, or say a pre-production or staging or disaster recovery scenario. What these all have in common is these are all reachable from outside the firewall, right? But there's much more that you can do. So for development and test scenarios, BlazeMeter load generators can be run on-premise using a lightweight Docker container. So the Docker container gets downloaded into your environment and it then phones home looking for work. There's only an outbound connection through your firewall here. There's no need to pierce your firewall to have us checking in with the agent. Instead, the agent has a heartbeat where it checks in for work periodically, and when the test needs to get launched, it goes to work getting stuff done. Right? This allows you to test internally. And there's a couple main configurations. One is sort of a load testing configuration where you have dedicated agents, each one only running one test at a time, and you could have many agents running that one test, and there's sort of an army of agents driving a lot of load. The sort of inverse situation, and one unique to BlazeMeter, is that a single agent can be defined to have multiple slots. And the reason you want to do that is you can actually run a large number of small tests in parallel. If you're only going to run 10, 50, 100 users, you can run multiple tests at the same time from the same agent and not need to have a large amount of infrastructure set aside, or conversely to have to wait sequentially for each individual test to run. So it's much more powerful to be able to run these tests in parallel. Now, the dev lab of the future is not likely to be physically in your building. It's likely to be up in the cloud somewhere, right? An example with Amazon would be the VPC, the Virtual Private Cloud. And this same solution I just described works exactly the same way in a virtual private cloud. You install the Docker container that has the BlazeMeter private location agent in it. It phones home looking for work. If you launch a test, it comes to life. Works the same way, right? Now let's talk about how you can execute tests besides in the web portal. One first case we'll talk about here is the developer's desktop. And in this case, we're using the Taurus DSL and command line interface, also known as a CLI, to run right from within an IDE or from a command line. And this allows a developer to build their test as they build their code, and to build it as text, not as something they have to do in a proprietary tool, right? And they then check in that code. Once it's working, they check in that code along with their application code. And the test can be run anytime that application is moved through the pipeline, right? So you commit it to source, you check out the test, run the test to make sure it's working. You move it on to create a build, you check out the test, run it against the build, etc., right? You get the idea. Now, in order to do that automation, you need to have some kind of framework running this. And the beautiful thing about the Taurus DSL is that it can be run from any tool that has a command line interface that can shell out. Right? We also have support for plugins for Jenkins, for TeamCity, and there's a open source plugin for Bamboo. And plugins are great. They can do things like run a pre-existing test. But where the power comes in with the Taurus DSL is the ability to create a test on the fly based on typical software principles like determining dependencies. You might say, well, I've just touched 3 modules and I know it affects these 5 areas of my app, and so I want to get the tests related to those things, check them out, build a single test about those things, set my thresholds appropriately for the environment I'm about to run the test in, and launch the test. And you can do all that through simply through the DSL. You could say I need this, this, and this test component. I want to set my pass-fail criteria using these criteria here. Run it now, and it all gets compiled together and run as a single test. And it's still being run by the SaaS infrastructure in the middle, but instead of a user creating that test by hand every time it needs to happen, you can use automation. So that's what we wanted to share with you about the different ways you can use BlazeMeter based on its architecture and the different kinds of usage scenarios.